Hello, and welcome to another segment of the Coatesville Area Public Library's Oral History Project. I'm Kirk Witmer, and with me today is Eloise Phillips, who has been a long-time resident of our community here in Coatesville, and in fact a lifelong resident of Chester County. Hello, Eloise. It's good to have you with us today.
It's nice to be here, Kirk.
Eloise, you first came to Coatesville in 1939, right smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about how the economy affected your family personally.
Well, my dad worked at Devitt's, and he probably made, if I remember correctly, $25 to $30 a week. Times were tough. They gauged whether they could afford the rent or not on their weekly salary. So our rent evidently was $25 to $30 a month. So we had $75 left over for whatever we needed. I can remember my mother going to the grocery store, food fair, A&P, looking for bargains, coming home, covering the dining room table and saying, "Oh, I spent $5. I mean, and this today, you don't even get out of a store with $5. I probably had a pair of play shoes and one for Sunday school. My clothes were always clean and washed. I don't remember having a great many dresses. And of course, then the girls all wore dresses. It was a tough time. I remember on Sundays, we had a treat, maybe an ice cream cone for a nickel, going down to Sandy's on 8th Avenue with a 2-quart jug to get 2 quarts of root beer for 5 cents a quart. And seeing Sandy and talking to him. He was a great guy. I think everyone would agree that it was a pretty rough period of time.
Where were you living exactly then?
On Chester Avenue,
On Chester
124 Chester Avenue.
How has that changed over the years? If you drive down Chester Avenue today, how does it compare with your memories of it then?
Approximately the same. Maybe the houses are fixed up a little more than they were then. There was a lot of soot on them at that point in time, I guess, from the steel mills. And I can remember my mother groaning when whatever the soot suddenly came on her wash. But it's not too much different.
Was the LGM Hall there then?
No.
No. Can you tell us when that was built?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I really don't know when that was built. Those things weren't very important to me.
Okay. As you got a little older, going through high school here in Coatesville, what are your memories of social life for a high school student back then?
Well, we had dances at school, and of course I went to Scott. Went to Gordon Junior High School. We had the Rainbow Room at the YW, and I think that was more when we got into high school. I'm not quite sure, but I think that's...
What was the Rainbow Room like?
It was in the basement of the Y, and they had rainbows all over the wall and bright colors, and we had dancing and social events there, and that went on for a few years.
This was the YWCA?
The YWCA, which is still there today. We were very active in senior high school in the Victory Corps because that was during the Second World War. We went to the YM and folded the red triangle to send to all the servicemen. We packed fruitcakes to go out to them. The school was very active with his Victory Corps. We earned enough money through sale of war bonds and stamps to pay for an ambulance. The school did. I mean, by sale, that amount of money was sold for war bonds and stamps, and we bought an ambulance. And there was a plaque in the ambulance saying, S. Horace Scott Senior High School.
Yes.
And that was very important to us.
I'm sure it was.
One of my best friends and I were responsible for checking all the names with the draft board. We went up to City Hall, got all the names weekly from this that were drafted. We called the school records. Everything, of course, was then on 3x5 cards, went into the office, checked our graduates, and their names were put on a great big board in the main hall at Scott. Now, where that is now, I don't know if they found it or not, but I talked to Mr. Chenger, and he had, just before he retired, said that would be a fantastic thing to find.
Yes.
I went to Mr. DeHalt. They said they were, I think that's his name, he's supervisor of
Frank
maintenance.
DeHalt, yes.
Yeah. And the last I heard, they were unable to locate it. But it would have been a treasure
Yes.
to have all of the names of the boys that were in the World War. Two, not one, two.
What were your endeavors after completing high school?
Well, I went to Westchester, and then I got married. So,
But you've also spent a few years in the Human Relations Department at Burroughs.
yes, I went to Burroughs in 1966, and I retired from there in 1990 as manager of human resources. And it was a great time. Of course, it changed to Unisys and merged
Yes.
with Sperry and became Unisys at that point.
Over the years as manager of human relations, was there any shift in the approach that one needed to recruit employees, or did you always have an abundance of applicants?
Well, for our hourly employees, we went through the state employment office, who tested them for agility, which we needed in computers. They had to pass that sort of a test, a comprehensive test, so they could read the instructions. Never had a problem around here. We had a great group, and was primarily women that worked on the floor, and was a great group of people. They were pretty high-level people, housewives primarily. Of course, for our professionals, we went to the colleges, we recruited Penn State, all over the Eastern Seaboard, ads. We really didn't have a lot of trouble finding people. It was pretty successful. Yeah. We got our technicians from Pittsburgh, tech schools, a lot of different tech schools in the area.
Eloise, can you back up a little bit to the days of post-war Coatesville? Obviously, there was a boom economically after the Depression ended, but if you would, compare your memories of post-war Coatesville to the Coatesville that we know today.
It was very different.
I'm sure it was.
On a Friday, and they were also open on a Monday or a Wednesday night. I don't remember. You could hardly get on the streets. There were so many people. We had many dress shops. There were all Coatesville people, not large conglomerates by any means. I can remember going into Betty Margolies and saying, Robin's at Penn State and she needs a new dress. She says, here, take these home. She'll like any of these. Try them on, bring back what you don't want. You don't get that anywhere now.
Not today.
The same thing at Penny's for my boys' pants. My one son, Tim, hated to shop, so they'd give me half a dozen pairs of pants and I'd take them home. There were several drugstores in downtown Coatesville, several shoe stores.
Can
Hershey's.
you remember the drugstores?
The names I don't remember, but there were several. There were at least 3 or 4 shoe stores. Hershey's, Simon's. There was one that was across the street from there. I don't remember that name. We had 2 dime stores. Somebody told me that there were at one time 3. Hardware stores was Devitt's and Sears, of course, and a small one across the street, and I don't know if that was post-war or not, but it was the neatest store. It was really an old store.
Another hardware store?
Another hardware store.
Across the street from Sears?
Across the street from Sears, and I don't remember when the man retired, but I think they were brothers, and I don't remember who. But
Do you know what business is in that location now?
I think it's an empty store.
Uh-huh.
There were no empty stores then. None whatsoever. We had Mosteller's where Carmen's is today. Across the street from that was Firestone. I think that was Firestone. There were just more stores than you can imagine in that 2-block area.
Shoulder to shoulder, so to speak.
Yes. Trunks Jewelry Store, Leon's Jewelry Store, Reams.
I'm sorry?
Reams Jewelry Store. And one across the street, I don't remember that name because I never went into it. But he just went out of business recently. Ray's, I think it was.
Yeah.
Just went out of business a year or so ago. But there were, I mean, it breaks my heart now when I go through Coatesville,
Yeah.
and there's nothing there.
It was once a thriving business
And
district.
of course, before we had this, where there was 2 or 3 department stores before the war, and they extended past. Of course, they're gone too.
Mhm.
So you could get anything you wanted in the clothing line, threads, material.
Mhm.
We had a Singer sewing machine shop. We had a camera shop. Just so many things that are
Yes.
gone today, unfortunately. Oh, and our we can't forget Shertox and Lipkins, and of course Braunstein's, which was removed to help change the Lincoln Highway alignment there on First Avenue, and all those little shops along the way. Mr. DeFleece's shoe repair shop.
Yes.
There was a dressmaker. There was a tobacco store on the corner, and then a couple other little shops, and they disappeared for the First Avenue and the parking lot back.
Mhm.
So there have been a lot of changes in Coatesville.
What about city government? I know that we've had a lot of changes. How have they impacted upon your memories and your life?
Well, Mrs. Regner, I think was the name, was mayor for so many years.
Yes, she was.
And it hasn't impacted me really because we moved out of Coatesville. But I have always followed the Coatesville news because and politics because I feel a part of Coatesville.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Eloise, since your first arrival in Coatesville until now, there have been a lot of changes in the Coatesville area school district and the way our schools relate to each other and operate. Tell us your memories of the changes you've seen relative to schools.
I remember when Scott was built. That was a real fantastic thing for Coatesville, knowing that we were going to have this great, big, beautiful school.
Yes.
Then, of course, the junior high school took over Coatesville High School on Main Street. That was something we were very important when we had our very own school. Then I started there in 7th grade. My sister graduated from the first graduating class in 1940 from Coatesville High School, excuse me. Scott Senior High School. Then the consolidation started in the 60s. I believe it was in the 60s, where they had the Brandywine School District, I think, which was Valley, and I don't know what other townships, and Coatesville merged and became consolidated. Rainbow School was enlarged. Pass School was finally closed, and that's up above the bridge on the left-hand side, which is Valley Township building now.
Mhm.
That was Pass School. James Adams was closed.
Where was James Adams?
That was in Coate Street, somewhere in the northeast section of Coatesville. That was Black School. It was closed. Pass School was also black.
Mhm.
Greg Ridgway was demolished. That was in the West End. Columbia Avenue, as I knew it, became Terry.
Yes.
That also was demolished. And that's sad that some of that, particularly Columbia Avenue or Terry School. Craig Ridgway was pretty well beat. I think it was ready to go. A lot of the outlying schools were, of course, the one-room schools and all of that. They went long before that. That was back in the early 50s into the 40s. And all of the schools merged. North Brandywine, South Brandywine were built. Then Reeseville and Friendship and all of those elementary schools. Maybe I said Rainbow was enlarged. So there have been so many changes in the school district, and now we're all one.
Yes. Eloise, you've been very active in PTA associations over the years that your children were in school. Can you tell us about any changes that you've seen in the way that PTAs address the social issues of the day regarding schools?
Well, I don't know if it was to address the social issues, but I know PTAs were very active in raising money for playground equipment. I know when I was in Rainbow PTA, we raised the money for playground equipment up there, which was very dilapidated. I know the Fallowfield School has also done that sort of thing. We had many fundraisers. When I got to South Brandywine, we went into ham dinners, which helped to pay for trips, different equipment and things that were over and beyond what the taxpayers had to pay. We were very involved in that. We started back to school nights where the parents came back and attended classes like students, which was interesting.
This would have been what year? Approximately.
Let's see, the 50s.
In the 50s.
Yes. And of course, when my children got to Cash or to Scott and Cash, PTAs were not so active. In fact, a lot of them changed over to PTOs, which are parent-teachers organizations. And my understanding is they were more open to do their own thing. They weren't constricted by PTA organizations, the association. They wanted them to do a certain set of things, and with PTOs they could run their own show, which is important for an area.
Well, of course it is. Eloise, let's go way back to something that you've mentioned to me earlier before we started here today. In the mid-30s, there were Americanization classes, and I think that would be interesting if you could give us a little more background on those and how they came to be and what they were doing.
Yes, my aunt, Margaret James, taught these Americanization classes. They were paid for somehow by the federal government. I'm not just sure. She had classrooms in the YMCA, and a lot of the people who had immigrated in the early 30s, their English wasn't that good, and of course they wanted to be able to read to their children, speak good English, and they came to the classes. And I used to go with her, and it was funny sometimes, and they would really laugh because of our language, the way there's so many words that mean the same, that sound the same and mean different things. And this was one thing that she tried to help them with. She was an excellent English teacher. And it was amazing how they grew in this and became more outgoing women, not just the mamas. And that's what you thought of at that point in time. And they did were able to help their children in school and not read to them. And it was a great thing at that point in time.
Of what nationalities or heritages were the students in these Americanization classes?
Polish, the Ukraine, some Italian, not too many Italian. I think it was more Polish, Ukraine type people. And because my aunt was so fluent in languages, she was very able to help them because she could pick up some of their language and then explain to them what she was talking about. And a lot of the women were still using primarily their home language at that time. She helped them getting, the primary reason for this was to get their citizenship.
Yes.
And she would take them to Westchester and they would get their citizenship papers. They'd be able to answer all the questions in the book, and that made it really great for them that they could become United States citizens.
And once they attained their citizenship, did many of them stay right within the Coatesville community?
Oh, yeah. I know their daughters, sons now. I met many of the children when I went with my aunt. They loved her dearly and appreciated what she was always welcome in their home. She was invited to all their weddings and everything imaginable. So it was very nice for her.
Must have made for a very close-knit community, I think.
Oh, yes. It was in the West End. It was a very close-knit community. I can remember going to their homes.
We talked earlier about the difference between the Coatesville Business District then and now. Are there any factors that you can point to that you think might have contributed to the decline?
Well, we lost Pep Boys, and it was between the famous restaurant and the Masonic Temple. That was lost. And
due to a fire, I think.
Due to a fire.
What year, do you recall? Or approximately?
I'm not sure. I think it was before the war. No, it was not. It was in the 50s. End of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, something like that. In the 30s, I think...
I should know about the Pep Boys fire, too, because I remember going to Pep Boys with my father as a small boy.
Yeah. The dime store area and the Grand Hotel burned. Now, the the Newberry's, I believe it was never rebuilt to a second story. The Grand Hotel was over Newberry's.
What is now Newberry's?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
What was
was
Newberry's?
Newberry,
I think
right.
it's Steel City,
Yeah,
whatever now.
Right, Steel City Market.
It burned out Midway, who then moved down to, I guess that's when they moved down to Pennsylvania Avenue. So I guess it wasn't so terribly long. And yeah, maybe they rebuilt up there, I don't know. But the Midway burned, I think. The dime store was very badly damaged, and the Grand Hotel was burned out and was never rebuilt.
So suffice to say, we've lost a number of our businesses to fires.
Oh, yeah. It was traumatic.
Which is surprising for me to hear that, because we have so many fire companies that are right very close to those businesses. And it's
But remember, that was all wood at that point in time.
exactly,
Timber.
very good point.
And very old and burned.
And all the fire companies were volunteers.
Absolutely. But they did a tremendous job and kept it from spreading, so we have to give them credit
Yes,
for that.
yes, we certainly do.
Yeah.
Eloise, I'm sure that over the years you've seen quite a lot of changes in transportation in the area. Elaborate on that for us, if you would.
Well, when we lived in Atglen, there was a and you could get on a trolley in Westchester and go all the way to Atglen and then pick up something else and get into Lancaster at one point in time. Had a pretty good bus system, which went away. It was a small one that was housed in Modena, I believe. They're still in business, but in a different capacity.
Would that be Readers?
No, that's
Or
not.
the short line?
I guess
I'm trying to recall the name of a bus company.
Brandy one? Well, it's a long time ago, I know. But they were housed in Modena, and I think probably it's been sold. I don't know if it's the same company or not. We had that bus service that went west, and of course the short line went east. We had a great deal more train service that went into Philadelphia. I can remember taking the train when I was in senior high school and going to the movies in Philadelphia, and you can imagine sending young girls into Philadelphia today on the train to go to the movies. Would be a no-no.
What were the trains like, trains themselves like?
Fairly well equipped, not real elegant or anything. They were starting to go downhill, I think, then.
Not so plush, but a little more than utilitarian.
Yes. And of course, they used to have a train that went from Reading to Wilmington. We had a Reading Company train station at First Avenue and Lincoln Highway, which has been demolished, where the flowers are now. That was an old train station. There also was a freight station south of the Lincoln Highway and back of where Devitt's and Lubin's is, and of course that's been demolished now. All the railroad tracks across where they shifted freight trains has gone down, I think, to one now, where there used to be four. So there have been a lot of changes. Now, everybody had to have automobiles because there was no other way to get around. It was very difficult. My dad had I remember his 36 Chevy, and the doors opened the wrong way, which I hated because I was always falling out of the car when we closed the door.
Oh,
they were so big and awkward. So I think many people started getting automobiles because the public transportation started to disappear. It was gone.
We've had a number of snowstorms in Coatesville over the years, but there's one in particular that I can recall, 1958. What are your memories of that one?
Well, I remember it because we were out of electric for 4 days.
Yes.
We used our camping equipment, a gasoline stove. We had a gasoline stove and a gas one. Finally, I convinced my husband to get the gas one because I was scared to death of the gasoline one. Our youngest son's birthday fell on the 21st of March, which was when either the day after or I think it was the day after the storm hit. And we couldn't have a birthday cake because we had nothing to bake a cake with.
I'm sure.
The snow was at least 4 feet on the level in our backyard. There was a road grader that broke down because it was unable to push the snow. Many people's flat roof garages broke down. We had a flat roof on a portion of our house, and my husband got up and shoveled it because we didn't want it to collapse. So it was a pretty bad storm. I know there were pregnancies in the area, and they had to bring in helicopters to get the women to the hospital. The ambulances would get so far and bogged down, the roads were so bad.
Yeah.
So it was quite an exciting time, and I think some people were without electric for 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I remember the storm. I don't recall how long we were out of electric. I happened to live at that time a block away from you. I was over on Pennsylvania Avenue at the time, but just a youngster.
No, at that time, we were in Valley Township. I was married, and
okay.
we had moved, and I was on the Lincoln Highway, so we were outside of Coatesville.
But I do remember the snow was so heavy
Yes.
that as it piled up on the 2 cherry trees that we had in our backyard, the weight of it broke them and split the trunks right down the middle all the way to the ground.
Yes, that was really an experience I never want to live through again,
Yes.
that's for sure. We've been through short outages, but nothing like that where you looked out and all you saw was a field of snow. It was pretty difficult.
Yes.
And when you had a pump, you had to go out and melt the snow and boil it for water. So it was an exciting, of course, we found out how our forefathers lived for
Yes.
a while.
It was quite an adventure.
Yes, it was.
Well, Eloise, I want to thank you for being a part of our project here today. You've brought some new memories to it that have not been shared before, and we're grateful for your participation.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you again.